Welcome to a Yin Yoga podcast. If you are new around here, welcome. If you are familiar, welcome back. Thanks for coming back. Before we dive into me reading the bio of today's guest and our topic today, I just wanted to share a little bit of podcast love that I have received on the Apple app. And I'm just going to read the handle because I don't know exactly how it's pronounced. But first letter J and then G-U-E-V-S. So that's the Apple handle, whoever you are. Thank you. I have a feeling I might know who you are, but maybe not. Dear Nick, many, many thanks for creating this podcast on all things yin. I have practiced yin for several years and love it. I love it so much that to deepen my practice, I completed my yin training here in your hometown. That would be my hometown of Calgary. That is my hometown. My teacher pointed me in your direction to expand my knowledge and understanding as a newbie baby teacher myself. Your many episodes are inspiring and knowledge-based. I look forward to sharing all of these amazing nuggets in the classes that I lead. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Oh, and there's the little hug emoji. I'm doing it on YouTube for those of you who can't see me with the hands up at the end, little hug emoji. So thank you so much for that podcast feedback. And if you have been here before, if you've been enjoying these episodes, if they've been helpful for you for leading your classes, if you wouldn't take a mind to offer a review yourself, I would be endlessly, endlessly grateful for that. You could do that on Apple. In your app, you just get on the actual podcast page. So you have to search out Yin Yoga Podcast, click the page, scroll down, and there's an opportunity on Apple to leave me 5 stars and or a written review or both. If you would prefer, I would love that. So either stars or written review. On Spotify, they don't have the written review component, but they do have stars, and it would be the same thing. You'd want to go into your app and then find the actual podcast page. Just search out Yin Yoga Podcast, and you can offer me some stars there. I would be super grateful. So if you've been loving the podcast and you want to take a minute to drop me a 5-star review, I would be super grateful. If you're brand new here, you can wait and see. Okay, let's get into today's episode. So the guest that I have today, I actually know. We actually studied together at Land of the Medicine Buddha with our teacher, Paul Grilley. And I can't remember which of my hundreds of hours we were together for, but it doesn't matter. So that's how we connected. We connected there. And she's also a fellow Canadian, no longer living in Canada. But we always had a great connection while we were in training. And of course, as one does, when you finish your teacher training, you find each other on the Facebooks and you connect, and that's how you can stay in touch. And so we have done that. So let me just introduce my guest. And I'll talk a little bit more in the actual episode about how this episode came to be and why I was excited to have Daphne on the show when she's here. We'll chat about that a bit more. All right, Daphne Luke. Daphne has been practicing yoga since the 90s and teaching yoga for 2 decades. Initially developing a love of yoga through Ashtanga and Yinyasa, and then discovering a passion for it with Yin Yoga. Daphne grew up in Canada and now lives in Auckland, New Zealand, where she teaches yoga part-time, trains new Yin Yoga teachers, and manages a private alcohol rehab center. She teaches Yin Yoga to recovering alcoholics as well as regular weekly community classes. She lives with her 16-year-old son and pug named Leo. So that's a bit more about Daphne. And when you hear from me next, I'll be here with Daphne. Welcome, Daphne, to a Yin Yoga podcast. I'm so stoked that you're here.
Hi, thanks, Nick. Thanks for inviting me.
I am very excited to have this conversation for a few reasons. One, the subject matter, obviously, which we'll get to in a moment, but also because you and I actually know each other. We've studied together with Paul at Land of the Medicine Buddha. And some of my fond memories of you at that time, other than just your general smiley presence, was I remember you and myself and Janice doing a little photo shoot by the big prayer wheel and like, assisting each other. And like, yeah, it was fun. And then of course we did what you do when you go away on these trainings is you connect on Facebook and you kind of stay in touch that way. And which we've done over the years. And you're also a fellow Canadian, which I didn't know actually until after we got back. And then it was like, oh, who knew? And then how this episode came to my mind and why I reached out to you was, I don't remember what I had posted, but I had posted something on Facebook about the damages of addiction. And you reached out in my DMs and said, are you a friend of Bill? And I was like, no. I do know that vernacular because I have been in those circles many times. And said, no, I'm not. I've actually usually fall on the other side of that equation, meaning I always fall in love with the people that are the addicts. And so you reached out then, and that was the first time that and then you said that you were, and that was the first time that I knew that little inkling into your story. And so when I was thinking about, I really want to have an episode on how useful yin yoga is for people that are going through recovery, I just was like, who do I bring on for this? And I thought of you fairly quickly and I was like, oh, Daphne. But then I was like, well, would she want to? And then when we connected and you told me about the work you're doing now, I was like, this is it. This is the perfect person to have to come on to talk about this. So we'll get into all of that recovery journey and all of your things as we go. But just for the listeners to kind of know the behind the scenes of how these things sometimes happen is, you make a connection, you learn something about somebody, and then it's like, oh, that's the perfect guest to have on. Maybe we can start with, as I usually do with these guest interviews, how did you find yoga?
Yeah, it's really good to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Nick.
My pleasure.
How did I find yoga? It was a long time ago now. It was in the late 90s. Working, I don't want to get too much into my boring old story, but working on super yachts, working overseas, very stressed, hadn't had a day off for 5 months, and I went for a massage, hoping that would help the stress levels. And she ended up saying, "Oh, why don't you come to my yoga class?" I went, "Okay, I've never tried that before." Fell in love with yoga, and it instantly, deeply and profoundly affected me and helped me and changed me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning, and then a regular
and that was
practice
from your first class.
My first ever class.
Yeah,
and
I
that
was the same way.
Yeah, right. It was
Yeah.
like, okay, I've come home. I found what I've been looking for forever. And yoga, as we know, is a full mind, body, spirit experience. And that was really what I was looking for. I wasn't in active addiction then. And I practiced pretty seriously for a few years. And then I said to myself, I'd really love to become a yoga teacher. If I could help just one person, like yoga has helped and changed me, then my whole teaching and learning journey would be worth it. I mean, little did I know in 25 years of teaching that I would be touching thousands of people, which is amazing. But so that was that. And then so really, in a nutshell, I started off with Ashtanga and then with Vinyasa. And I loved yoga. I mean, I was pretty passionate about it. I became a teacher. And then in 2009, I discovered Yin Yoga with Bernie Clark in Vancouver, because I'm originally from Vancouver. And I went from really, really loving yoga to absolutely falling passionately head over heels in love with yoga. I thought, this this is it, right? The full experience, all inclusive. No longer was it about trying to get your foot in the right position and alignment and looking good and getting better at this pose and standing on your head and putting your foot behind your head and all that stuff. It was just about energetics and
Mhm.
being in the moment, being present, and again, affecting the full mind, body, spirit, and coming back to me. When I still love vinyasa, don't get me wrong, but I find my mind is occupied by the next move and the
Mhm.
flow
Mhm.
and music, and all of that sort of stuff. When I'm with yin, I'm with me, and I'm looking inward, I'm turning inward, and that's what most of us need in our busy yang lifestyles where we go go go. We need that balance of the yin in our lives. I mean, of course, this is a yin yoga podcast, I'm preaching to the converted, of course, but that was it for me in 2009. And I'd already, I was already a teacher, and I said, no, I want to start, this is what I want to be doing, I want to be bringing this to people.
So you were living in Vancouver still at the time, and you just kind of went to
No,
Bernie's class, or were you just
no,
visiting?
actually. So I, life circumstances, ended up living in New Zealand. That's where I'm living now. And I would travel home at least once a year to Vancouver to visit family. And then, of course, it's, as we know, yoga mecca in Vancouver. So I'd go to classes at Semper Viva and various places, taking as many classes as I could and different teachers and stuff. And then I was like, whoa, what's this yin? Like, what? So then I thought, no, I want to bring this back to New Zealand. And I did. So started teaching yin in New Zealand. New Zealand's always been a little bit behind with
Mhm.
trends. Was probably 8 to 10 years behind Vancouver or North America for yoga. Nobody had heard of yin, but I was like, I'm going to teach it. I had to convince the studio owner that this is what it's going to be. This is it. And they were like, yeah, I don't know. Nobody wants to sit around for 5 minutes at a time in the dark, And I'm like, no, no,
Mhm.
just give me this. And they said, okay, we'll give you a chance. Saturday morning, you can do one class. And I started off for the first 6 months or so, that I'd get about 8 people on a Saturday morning. And then a couple months later, it would be 15. And then it grew and grew and grew. And then we were turning people away on Saturday mornings. And then yin started sort of mushrooming from there and becoming more popular. So
So
yeah, and now
was
the classes are packed.
was Bernie's training the first yin training that did you take Bernie's training? Was that the first one?
I did. So
Mm.
I started teaching yin. Actually, it's funny. I started teaching yin in a yang way. We would do a pose, go right into the next pose, right into the next pose. And then I did Bernie's training in 2010 and learned, rebound. Okay, slow it all down. Learned a lot more about it. And he was obviously, like, you and I do, talking Paul Grilley, Paul Grilley, Paul Grilley.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
got it in my head, okay, I'm going to go and train with Paul Grilley. So subsequently, I've traveled from New Zealand to California 5 separate times to train with Paul and have my 500 hour with Paul Grilley.
Yeah, and that is no small feat. Um, I think when those that are Americans are listening to this and they think, yeah, okay, so whatever, you went 5 different summers to California to study with Paul, they really don't realize, like, for those of us that are not Americans, what a big procedure that is. Like, first of all, you
Yep.
got to, and way more so for you as far as airtime. Like for me, it was a pretty quick flight, but you have to book the time off. You got to fly out there. Then there's the dollar exchange, which never works in my favor. And don't know about
Yes,
Australian
me
and New
neither.
Zealand. No, it never works in our favor to pay in US funds. So, that adds another layer. And then, of course, there's the whole pausing your life. And um, so and newer yoga teachers that are listening to this that maybe kind of didn't start teaching much before COVID times, I think really have a very different attitude towards training. I've noticed that everything, they either want to go away on vacation and have this sort of spa-like experience where they pick up a teacher training at the same time, or they want it to be like on demand online or like a super intensive online. And I think they really don't realize, like, how our generation of teacher, how much work it was to go study with somebody and how much money and how much time,
Yeah.
which in one sense is really good because only the serious are going to do it, right? Or the serious and the people who can save up enough, because I'm sure there's like a lot of people that would have loved to study with Paul or just didn't have the privilege of the finances, or they had small children or whatever the case may be. So the privilege of it, but also the dedication that it takes to carve out that time, save up the money, fly there, and do all of that. So yeah, 500, 5 separate trips is no small feat. That's for sure.
And I was fully committed. Like yin yoga was absolutely my path when I discovered it and teaching it. And, the feedback I've gotten through the years from students, I mean, it's changed their lives. So, people come to the mat for so many different reasons, whether it's grieving or health issues or addiction, insomnia. I mean, who knows, right?
Mental health. Yeah.
But mental health, so many, I mean, the list is long. But it's, even more so than any other style of yoga, you can help so many people, and that's really rewarding. But to back that story up, I was fully committed to the journey of learning and wanting to share it. And, I didn't go there for my own spa experience. I went there to learn so I could share this with everyone.
And it's not. Land of the Medicine Buddha is a phenomenal place. Probably one of my favorite places in the whole wide world.
Favorite place in the world.
The moment I went there the first time and stood on the Land of the Medicine Buddha land, I was like, I'm at home. Like, this is home. But it's not spa-like. It's more like summer camp, if you can't deal with spiders, you're not going to go there. So it's not like going to Bali at some like fancy spa like hotel and taking a teacher training. It attracts both because of the time, the dedication, the expense, and also the fact that it isn't, fancy spa retreat kind of place. I think it attracted serious practitioners for the most part. I think there's always a couple of folks always at every training where you're like, why are you here? But for the most part, it really attracted, from my experience, people that were mature and serious about yin. Like, they weren't fucking around, it was like they were all in with the yin, so to speak.
Most of our colleagues over the years who have studied with Paul are very serious, traveling the world, have podcasts, videos, YouTube. We're really dedicated to spreading the message of yin yoga and skeletal variation, and as it was intended. There's a lot of classes out there, as we know, that are calling themselves yin yoga, like pushing them deeper into poses, trying to incorporate alignment and all of that. But no, as we know it, pure yin yoga, they're all dedicated to that worldwide. And we have this incredible worldwide network of colleagues that have trained under Paul. And I stay in touch with a lot of our colleagues.
Yeah. Do you do mostly through Facebook or like via email and stuff too?
Just Messenger and stuff, and Facebook.
Me too.
It's also really interesting for me because I am training teachers now, like you are, to stay in touch. And if I have any questions or support, we need support or encouragement. We're always there for each other. I know I've done that for you, and you've done that for me, and it's been incredible.
And I also think when you have this sort of global community, when someone reaches out and maybe they aren't a fit for your training because they can't get to you or, whatever, it's like, I love that I can be in a group and somebody can say, I'm looking for a yin training here, and they'll name a place, and I'll be like, oh, I know who to hook you up with, Yeah, it's like, I know who to tag in this post. I know someone, I have a colleague that, I studied with that teaches yin near you, so that's really helpful. Yeah, because it is quite different. And I know what you mean about, yin getting so watered down now. And just so many things that I hear mostly in Facebook groups and stuff about yin, or with the teachers that I train, like things that they'll come in saying that they've heard or that another teacher has said, where I'm like, say what? Like, where are you all getting this from? I do not understand, Yeah.
Well, I've had similar experiences with people who cover my classes. So for a long time in New Zealand, or the area in Auckland that I live, I was really the only one. There's only a couple other colleagues Paul Grilley colleagues from New Zealand, and they've left there now in Europe. So I'm the only one I know of in New Zealand who has trained with Paul. There might be others now that I don't know of, but I don't know. So when I go away on these trainings, or when I'm away right now, it was hard to find someone to cover. So, the day I get back, all of my regular students would come running, and they'd say, "Oh, you're not gonna believe what happened. They were trying to do alignment, and they didn't have any music, and they didn't even know what a meridian was, and they tried to push us deeper, and I was like, oh no, because there just wasn't anyone to cover." So,
Yeah.
I
I
had
experienced that a lot too with here, even though there's a lot of teachers that have taken a yin training, they've taken like a 20-hour that was taught by somebody who was never actually taught by, Paul or even Sarah or Bernie. It's like, it's getting so diluted now. And it's the same thing. I find that the yin, like there is somebody here teaching 100-hour yin training who has never studied ever with the founder of yin or a direct descendant of, which, like that's where these things get so watered down. Yes, not everybody can go study with Paul, because Paul's actually not doing those kinds of trainings anymore. He's I think it was our year was kind of I think there was maybe one after that where it was like, this is kind of the last year of him participating in the Yoga Alliance silliness. He was like, I'm letting that go. He just became more and more interested in having deeper trainings philosophically, spiritually, for those of us that he has already trained, like for him to be able to continue to lead us where we are now that we've done 500 with him. That became, I think, more interesting from what he said to me, and appealing to him than just to continue to run these kind of like, here's level 100, here's level 2 100. Plus, I remember him saying, even live to us when we were there, like, I have all of you now that can go out and run these 50-hour or 100-hour level. Like, I don't need to be the one that trains everybody. He was more interested in continuing our education, which I really appreciated. Not that I've been able to take him up on that, but
I remember him saying that, because I remember now you and I did level 4 together. And he was really, remember, he was giving us those extra hours, and he was really grooming us or talking to us to like how to carry this on and how to present this and take it out into the world. And of course, he makes all of his bone photos available. He's given us permission to use all of his lectures, all of his material. He just wants us to go out there. Yeah, I think he's ready. He's handing on the baton.
And he's very generous. He, just the fact that he's refused to ever trademark this or like, kind of brand it in himself in that way. So he's very generous with everything he gives us. And the other thing I love about Paul, we're getting a little sidetracked here, but hey, little talk about Paul's never a bad thing. The other thing I really love about him is that he's also not dogmatic, doesn't expect us to be dogmatically attached to the way he did it. Like he doesn't care. Like because the last training that I did with him, I was just partway through my yoga therapy training, and it became really aware. I became really aware of after I took my trauma module, of my languaging in yin. And so I was like, okay, yin is incredibly therapeutic. And yet some of these words, I don't know how these are sitting with me. And I remember sitting down with him and like just asking him if I could have 5 minutes, and just saying to him, like, this is what I'm struggling with, that, nothing about the physical yin practice is, is in opposition to my yoga therapy training. Nothing at all. If anything, they're very complementary, but the languaging I'm having a little bit of trouble with. And, and he looked at me so matter of factly and just said, well, I mean, you should just use whatever words work for you and your people. Like, just, like he just
would have said that.
Just doesn't care if I use the word edge or discomfort or rebound, or if I use my own words. He's like, that's what you should do then. Like, he's so generous with preparing us, but also at the same time, totally unattached to us all becoming little clones of him,
Yes. Yeah, he says that over and over. I mean, what was his parting words to us are always go forth with courage and confidence.
Yeah,
Have I got it right?
I
Yeah.
think so. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's written in his manual as well. And all of my students know who Paul Grilley is. I talk about him, endlessly, of course. Um, yeah.
I try to as
I'm
well.
forever grateful that I have been able to learn directly from him.
Yeah. I think back all the time to the fact that I was able to go not once, not twice, not three times, not four times, but five times to LMB and to study with him in that way at that place is just, I think anyone who's been there knows that's magic right there. There's something about that that's just, yeah.
Yeah, I feel exactly the same. I feel like I go home when I go there. It's one of my favorite places on earth,
Yeah.
and some of the greatest pivotal points and pivotal moments in my life have been transformative moments have been
Yeah.
there.
So let's fast forward a little bit. So you've taken your yoga, you've become a teacher, initially Vinyasa, Ashtanga, and then you kind of discover a Bernie class and you're like, whoa, what was that happening? And you took his training and then you start going, did you do your years with Paul like back to back to back? Because it's a lot. Or did you kind of like
No,
take one, take a year off, go again? Yeah, that's what I had to do too.
yeah, 2012 to 2017 was my 5 trainings with Paul.
That was, your years are very close to mine. I'd have to look at my own website to know, but I think mine was like 2011 to 2017. And there was definitely a gap in there somewhere, but yeah. Yeah. And I,
Yeah, so
planned to keep going. And then this ugly worldwide ugliness happened, you know. Yeah. Kind of affected things like ability to travel and, all the things. So, and so how soon did you start feeling the pull to train teachers then?
um I didn't right away. I started having students. So I taught a lot of classes. I was up to 14 classes a week at one point, several years, well, about 5 years ago. Classes were growing. Now I'm kind of backing off on the amount of classes I'm teaching because I'm working at an alcohol rehab. I teach yin classes there as well as part of the rehab. But my classes I have now, some of my students have been with me for 16 years.
Amazing.
They started off in Vinyasa and they transformed with me into Yin. So I'm down to about 5 classes a week, public classes, and they're about 50 people a class.
Nice.
But over the years, I've had students come to me and say, look, you're the only Paul Grilley trained person I know, a teacher I know. Would you ever be interested in doing a course? And I was interested, but the hurdle for me was coming up with the content, the manual. I really wanted to produce a visual manual with photos of the poses and some variations and props and options. And just the fact sitting down and working at a laptop was like, just would send
It's
me
so
into
much work.
yes,
Yeah, a
get me
teacher
into it
training manual for
seriously.
those of you who have never had to do it. Oh my God. It's,
Honestly.
yeah, it's so much work. I can't count the number of, swear words and tears that happened while I was doing that. Yeah.
I know. Actually, you just made me remember. I was listening to a podcast of yours, and you said, "I've got the soul of a mermaid in the mouth of a sailor."
I do. It's very true.
Really
Yeah.
resonated with me.
Yeah. That's why there's a
No,
language
yeah,
warning on all of these episodes. I'm just like, I'm not going to stifle myself or my guests if the
yes.
F-bomb, if the F word happens to be the correct word in the circumstance, we're going to use it, Yeah.
It's the most versatile word in the English language. So if I drop one, I hope you don't mind.
No, there's already been a language warning in the introduction. So if people
Good.
didn't pick
Okay.
up their headphones and their kids hear it, that's on them at this point. Plus I have opinions about whether or not it's I think it's kind of silly that we shield children from swear words until a certain age, and then all of a sudden they get to hear them and use them. It's like, what is that? They're just words.
That's another podcast right
Yes,
there.
that's a branch for another time. And so I know for me, I started training yin teachers only when people started asking me. Like it never occurred to me, even though at the time when I think I'd done the first 3 maybe of Paul, but I hadn't done the last 2. It never occurred to me to run a teacher training. It just was not even on my radar. I was like you, I was teaching a boatload of classes, and I was just so happy that I had this yin tool and that my yin classes were growing. But it wasn't until teachers started coming to me and saying, hey, you seem to kind of have your shit figured out with this whole yin business. Like, do you have a training, or can I, work with you? And so my initial trainings were actually an apprenticeship mentorship model. It was like yoga old school style, like where it's like you just come to the classes, and you sit at the front. You do that first, and then you sit at the front of the room with me, and then I give you things to read, and I answer your questions, and and then eventually after a lot of that, you might teach a pose in my class, and then maybe 2 poses, and then from there, when I need a sub, you're going to take the class. And so it was very much that old method of mentorship and apprenticeship, which I still think is absolutely the best, most solid way to do it. And it's also not going to be cheap, because if you're paying for an established teacher's one-on-one attention, that's going to cost way more than being able to join a group training. And so, eventually I started that way. And then it was through a local yoga therapy college, the one that I took my training with, and I'm not teaching with them anymore, but where I didn't sort of throw my shoe in the mix with them, but their yin trainer, I was just, because I was in their program, as a student getting my yoga therapy certification, and I used applied credit to skip their yin module, because the 400 I already had with Paul at that time definitely trumped the 20-hour yin that they were offering. It was like, I think I could use some applied credit here. And while that module was on is when I ran away and did my last 100 with Paul. But what would happen is, because my fellow students in the program knew that I had this yin expertise and all this yin study, is they would take the training they were offering, and they would come to me and they'd be like, so when we took the yin training, she was saying this, and like she was saying, or I would just hear things like in the room, and I'd be like, eyes pop out of my head, like, what? Like, and finally I had to reach out to the directors and just say, I don't know if you're aware that there's a problem here, but here's the questions that my colleagues, my fellow students, are emailing me, and here are the things that they're saying. Somebody had gotten injured. How you could be injured in a yoga therapy program, first of all, in a yin training, I mean, something's going off the rails there, And so I reached out to them and just said, you should probably be aware of some of these things. And I don't know if I won't name names of students, I'll keep their privacy, but like, here's what people are emailing me, and here's what people are saying. I just thought that you should know, because they're probably not saying it to you. And I'm also kind of getting like a lot of emails. So if you could figure this out, that'd be great, And so then they eventually just were like, you should run it. I was like, okay. So I did. And that was the first time that I taught in a group and had to create a manual and like all of that thing. And I'm no longer teaching with them. Yeah, because I just have learned in the long run that, and I'm not saying I would never teach for someone else again, but it would be very much a, here's what I teach. Here's how long it is. If you don't like it, too bad kind of thing. Because I just found that, for me, keeping the middleman out, so to speak, is better, because then I can just adapt the program to what I see the needs are of the people that are in front of me,
I'm really lucky in New Zealand with my yin yoga teaching, because I've had pretty much total autonomy to do what I want, because yin was something that I really broke through and opened up in New Zealand. So nobody's ever said, oh, I really want it to be this way or that way. They've just given me, and yin has grown. So, I mean, it's, you can fill classes every day of the week. Yeah, and it'll happen organically for me as well with the teacher training. But going back to that manual, boy, I that was I am not someone to sit in front of a computer, but now that I have it and I've got the course and I enjoy it. I've always loved sharing what I love,
Mhm.
and yin yoga is like my number one passion, of course. So I love seeing my trainees go on and teach and their faces light up and they've got their own communities now, and it's really exciting passing that baton. Like I kind of feel I saw Paul pass the baton on to us, and so I'm 55 and I've been teaching a long time like you, Nick, and I'm at the point now where I'm reducing the amount of classes I have. I do one teacher training a year. I feel like I'm getting a lot of joy passing that baton on to new
Mhm.
teachers, the next generation of teachers.
Yeah. I feel so much resonance with what you just said. And I think one thing that is so missing in the way that teachers are trained now is an access to mentorship. Like
Mm,
there just isn't a lot. Um, there's a lot of fairly young, fairly inexperienced, fairly new teachers training teachers. And
yes.
and
Oh, don't
so
get me started.
yeah, so for folks like us that are like, I've been doing this for 2 decades already, like teaching, not including my practice before that. And I still feel like 2 decades as a baby on the path, even though, that's kind of a long time in nowadays standards. Um, but I just feel, which is part of the reason that I created this podcast actually, was that um I could just see so many teachers out there floundering and struggling.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is going to come across on the recording, y'all, but I'll cut it out, this part out if it does. There we go. Car alarm going off. I'm never sure how much my noise cancellation actually cancels, um but yeah, for me, I find that there was just so many teachers that were really struggling with all of this stuff with yin. And so that's kind of why I made the podcast. I was like, I see so many questions in like Facebook groups or in the trainings that I run.
Mm.
And I just was like, okay, I need to create this as a resource for people to be able to get some support, because it's difficult. And yes, and I agree. Nothing makes me more excited. I love teaching my yin training and seeing that little like kind of spark, and
Yeah.
just, yeah, it just,
The
and
passion.
yes, and then seeing people that came in because well, I need some continuing ed credits, and you know, I've had people sign up, oddly enough, for my training that are like, I'm not so sure about yin, but I am sold on you. Like they're sold on me, but they're like still not sure about yin. And then they take the yin training, and to see them go from like, I don't know about this, to like madly, deeply in love is just, yeah, it's such a joy.
Well, just taking from something you just said, people might come for the credits. I am not Yoga Alliance certified, and
Me
that
neither.
is and nor is Paul Grilley, and that is a conscious decision because we are, well, I find that they're very limiting. We
Hmm.
are skeletal variation. I have nothing to do with alignment yoga. I teach my vinyasa non-alignment. I offer options instead, a lot of free movement.
Functional.
But yeah,
Yeah.
and so someone who's going to train with me wants to learn pure yin as a direct descendant from Paul Gurley's training, and not because they want some Yoga Alliance thing because
Yeah.
the studio wants it or because they need more credits.
Yeah. And I made that decision as well. I'm not registered with Yoga Alliance. And I did 2 whole episodes on that. So y'all can go back and listen to that if you really want. You want to listen to me and 3 other colleagues talk about why we didn't do this. And so, yeah, I'm the same. People have to want the knowledge and the information. Like that's why they're there. They're not there to get some sort of, you know, rubber stamp that says I'm in the cool kids club. Um, so I would love to start to talk a bit more about your journey as far as like yoga and then recovery, because I'm assuming somewhere in this yoga exploration from your first class till now is when you either became an active addiction, and then when you got clean. And I would love to hear a bit more about that journey.
Yeah, let's start right away with the alcohol addiction. So to be clear, I'm an alcoholic in recovery. Alcohol was my thing. I never got into drugs. I never got into anything else. It was always purely alcohol. So I don't know really much about drug addiction. I do work for an alcohol rehab, and we just take alcoholics. So alcoholism, there's very little actually known about the ins and outs of it. It is a physical disease. It's a mental obsession. It is a disease. It's been classified as a disease by the American Health Association and the World Health Association since the 1950s. And about 10% of the population, they estimate about 10% of the population in the world has the DNA that is conducive to alcoholism. But it's a two-part disease. So if you're born with and I'll go into more about that, it's a physical allergy to the actual alcohol molecule. But if you are born with that DNA, it's kind of like your DNA loads the gun, and then life's circumstances pull the trigger.
That is
So
such
not
a good
everyone,
analogy. Yeah.
yeah. So not everyone with this DNA that I have is going to become an alcoholic. You need that two-part mental obsession and the physical side of it. And also not all heavy drinkers are alcoholic, but all alcoholics are heavy drinkers. So um, the physical side of it in a nutshell, when I ingest alcohol, immediately with the first drink, a chemical change occurs in my body and in my brain. So I lack the enzymes that break down the alcohol molecule. Instantly, I start producing a chemical called acetaldehyde, which is chemically very similar to acetone. And this has been proven, this has been studied. So, you could take a sample of my blood and it's got this, whereas someone else who hasn't got this gene does not produce this. When this acetaldehyde is in my body, it causes a chemical reaction in my brain to crave more. So basically, when I'm going to use the term normie, 90% of the population ingest alcohol, apparently their body gives them signals like, oh, we're feeling a bit dizzy, we're feeling a bit queasy, we should probably slow down on this. I've never had that. The chemical reaction in my brain says, oh, you need more of this and you need more of it now and as much as you can take. So this is why you'll see someone, true alcoholic with the allergy, who is completely off their face and they're still pouring it down their throat as fast as they can because it's a chemical reaction in the brain and we can't stop. So there's a saying, one drink is too many, 100's not enough.
I have a question about that. So a couple questions, actually. So I liked your kind of gun bullet analogy. And so if somebody has this, what was it called again in their blood or the
Acetaldehyde, so basically acetone.
I'm not going to try to say that word, but if somebody has that, and like you said, that doesn't necessarily mean someone will be an alcoholic if they maybe they're raised somewhere where they never ingest alcohol, or who knows, right? But that there's also, I always think there's the nature versus nurture equation to this, right? Like, because I know of, several addicts who probably don't have that, but also ended up with alcohol problems as a response to trauma. It's like, horrific things happen to me. I don't know how to block it out. So, but when I'm loaded, I don't feel that,
it's the numbing.
Yeah, it's the numbing. It's this is how I'm going to not deal with this, not process it, not have to look at it, and so this is probably why I would imagine within addictive communities, there's like a fair bit of diversity even. And then of course we have to think about things like intergenerational trauma. So there's, like your inherited, blood type that is going to make this a problem for you. And then there's people also that have like, and I know I've got plenty of it just based on what I know about my family, the traumas that have been handed down that you don't even know are little trauma things because to you, they're so normal. They're so, what do you mean? This is just the way it was in my house kind of thing. Yeah. So do you see both sides of that with in recovery meetings and stuff?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things that I want to address. So first of all, I'm what you would call a pedigree alcoholic. It's rife in my family. My mother, siblings, uncles, cousins, they're all alcoholics. So
Okay.
it's sometimes somebody will an alcoholic and they're like, there's no history of it in my family. Well, I don't know. There's history of red hair. It just comes back as a gene. Who knows? But
Yeah.
typically it is a family problem. So I grew up in an alcoholic home. I'm not going to go into all the details of the trauma, being a Generation X, all the trauma I've experienced and stuff.
Yes.
But,
I can
you know,
relate. The Generation X
yeah,
part is a trauma already. Yes. Yeah.
exactly. um, so I grew up in an alcoholic home with alcoholic behavior, alcoholic thinking, alcoholic sayings, alcoholic behavioral patterns, and that was my normal, like you just touched on. So it wasn't until I was a teenager and started spending time at other people's houses and other friends' houses and thinking, oh, they don't do it like that. And it wasn't really until I got into recovery that I realized, oh, all of those behavioral patterns, thought patterns,
Mm.
that kind of verbal abuse, etc., was typical alcoholic behavior, borderline narcissism, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I also wanted to address that alcoholism is a progressive disease. So, I didn't become alcoholic from the first drink I took when I was 16.
Right.
It typically will get worse and worse and worse in people's lives, and it gets worse. Everyone's alcoholic journey is different. So somebody might start drinking. Let's say we all started drinking at age 20. Somebody might be fully blown alcoholic by the time they're 25 or 29. Mine manifested really slowly. I didn't enter recovery until I was 48. I'm 55 now. And alcoholism, it's a progressive disease, but it's not a linear progression like that. Like,
Right.
it starts off slow, gets a little bit worse, a little bit worse, a little bit worse, a lot worse, a lot worse, and then just really takes off. And until we've hit a point where we hit a rock bottom, or we're just literally sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
reach out for help. Not everyone and that rock bottom is a gift. We call it the gift of desperation, where you just surrender completely and will do anything to
Yes.
get this monkey off your back.
I had a
And
similar experience, not with addiction, but with my anxiety journey. Like, I never actually took a look at the fact that I didn't even know I had anxiety, actually, until I
mhm,
was on my knees, crippled, like not functional, didn't know how to help myself, couldn't figure it out. That was when I was like, I think maybe I have anxiety. It's like, it's like, but I mean, been my whole life, but like you said, similar with my anxiety, it was kind of like, it was in childhood, and it kind of, but then when I, gave up my whole life and moved to the magical island here, and all safety and security was gone, that's when it was like, holy shit, um, and it was a gift. It was absolutely a gift for me to hit that
yeah,
bottom. Yeah, for sure.
absolutely.
Not fun,
Surrender.
but
No, it's
yeah.
not a lot of fun. It's not a lot of fun. But alcoholism, and I can really only speak for alcoholism because that's my journey. But it's the one disease that I can think of where the sufferer is better off afterwards in treatment, than they would have if they had never had the disease to begin with. Like,
Mm-hmm.
now,
Mm-hmm.
I work my program, the 12 steps. I have community. I help others. I'm in service. My life's pretty good today. But
Yeah.
7 years ago, when I hit a rock bottom, it was so bad I wanted to die. And
Oh.
I literally, I describe rock bottom, and everyone's rock bottom is different levels and different views and stuff. But I describe it, Nick, as being in a really deep pit with steep sides. There's no ladder. There's no one else there. I can't get out. All I can see is a little bit of sky way up high in the top, and it's hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I was faced with a decision, because my life was completely unmanageable, and I was powerless, absolutely powerless over alcohol. And I describe it as, I wanted to die. I did. I really did. But something, Like, I never had any family say, hey, I think you got a problem. I never had any friends come to me and say, look, maybe you can try coming to AA or try this, or I was completely on my own. It's a very isolating disease. This disease wants to get us on our own so that it can control our head, and it ultimately is a
Yes.
fatal disease. This disease is out to kill me.
Yeah.
So when I was faced with the decision, do you want to die? I did want to die, but it was like something took me by the hand, led me out of this pit, and took me to reach out for help with the alcoholic community, or the sober community. And I'm so glad I did. I didn't look back, but
Did
it's a
you
horrible,
sorry, I just wanted
insidious.
to touch base a little bit earlier on in the story. Did you because I know that there are, from my experience with with alcoholics, is that there are alcoholics that get loaded all the time, and that's usually a little bit more clear to the outside world, right? Where it's like, oh, they're stumbling home every night. That's a little more clear. But
Yeah.
then there's also the alcoholics who tend to camouflage it better, and there's the hidden drinking, but they're rarely inebriated, or if they are, it's like in a situation where society would justify it as no big deal, like, the weekend barbecue, and oh, they had, but like the day-to-day, like that functional, so air quotes here for those of you who can't see me, functional alcoholism, you know
Yeah.
where it's like holding down a job, paying their taxes, raising the kids, doing the things, and yet completely dependent on alcohol.
Yeah, that's where I was. So I was riddled with fear that I would be found out, that because I knew I had a problem, but also at the same time, it's a mental illness, and that my disease was telling me that it's okay, it's normal. And that's the insanity of it. I look
Mm-hmm.
back to the things I did and the way I thought back then, and I think it was complete insanity. And because of the progressive nature, it started off 2 wines a night, 3 wines a night, a bottle and a half, 2 bottles. And then we call them yets. I haven't done that yet. Oh, there it goes. I've done that. So I start drinking at noon, and then I
Mm-hmm.
start taking a stainless steel cup with a lid on it to work. And then there's the milestones. Okay, I feel really shitty this morning. I'm just gonna have what's left over in that bottle before I go to work, or
Mm-hmm.
before,
Mm-hmm.
and then when I bought my car, I made sure that it had really good drink holders so that I could put my drinks in it when I was driving. Just the insanity of it is,
Yeah.
uh, I can't even imagine it now. But yeah, no, it comes to the point where I keep thinking, I'll stop next week, I'll stop next month, I'll try dry July, I'll try sober October, and all of those sort of things. And I actually scared myself, because I'd have a big bend, June 30th, I'd be at a big bender, I'm gonna go dry July, this is gonna be a month. I'd get to the 2nd and I'd be like, I can't do this. I would last till the 3rd of July, and then I thought, I scared myself. I thought, I really can't stop. And
Mm-hmm.
that's when things progressively started getting worse. I got a little scared, thinking maybe I do have a problem. Maybe I need to reach out. But then, I dismissed that. I've already pretty much isolated myself from my friends, my coworkers, my family, and I'm on my own. And I think, no, I'll just keep going. I'll keep going. This is fine. I need this to function. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm functioning. I got a house. I got a car. I've got a job. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, and I think that that's actually, in some ways, harder to kind of hit your bottom and get the help when you do have the house, the car, the job, when you're functional. Because we as a society, we always think of alcoholics, well, maybe not always, I think it's changing now, finally, thankfully, but we always think of alcoholics as that guy on the corner with the shopping cart who's like drank his whole
The
life
person under
away.
the bridge with the paper bag. Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
like we don't
Totally.
realize that, like, there's a whole group of alcoholics that are somehow holding it together until they can't anymore, that you might not ever know, that they
And
are.
this disease is not discriminating, right, from all areas of society, all classes of society, all levels of education, all races. It doesn't discriminate. It's absolutely everywhere. And now that I work in an alcohol rehab, I see how much suffering. I mean, we have an 0800 number. It rings continuously, and there's so much suffering out there in all areas of society.
Yeah. It and I think that for me, from what I've witnessed from beloveds that I have that were alcoholics, but also um I won't get into my stuff too much because it's not the point of the episode, but I remember when you reached out to me in the DMs and said, are you a friend of? And I said, no, I'm always been on the other side of that equation. So
Mm.
my mother, seriously mentally complex PTSD, addicted to painkillers. So like it started then. Every boyfriend that I've had, other than one over my life, has had an addiction problem, whether it be alcohol or drugs. So I've witnessed it from the other side, and I've been to more than my share of meetings, the ones that are open meetings where you're allowed to bring friends and
Oh,
family.
cool.
And oh yeah, I've been to
Cool.
tons. Um, and so I've definitely seen, kind of a little peek behind the curtain. I mean, I always wonder sometimes with those open meetings how open they are when they know that there's so-called normies there, but who knows. And so I've witnessed all of that and been on the other side of it. And I think that part of the reason why first of all addiction is awful and all addiction is suffering. But one of the
And
reasons
it's
why
not a choice. It's
yeah,
not like we choose that. Yeah.
who would choose that, right? Like, oh, you know what I think I'll do? That sounds like a good idea. Nobody would choose that. But what
People think that. People think that, though. They
I think
do.
is harder about alcohol is that it is so socially normalized and
Correct.
so easily accessible.
Correct.
Like, I mean, until recently, and now Canada's kind of gone a little crazy with handing out the drugs here, but until recently, if you were going to be a drug addict and injecting drugs, I mean, you'd have to really work hard to get that. And it would be, you know, it would be criminal, and you would have to be, kind of, finding people in alleys. And like it was, whereas with alcohol, I mean, God, I drank alcohol before I was even of age,
Oh,
because
yeah.
back when I was a teenager, I actually looked more mature for my age. Now I get the opposite always, but when I was a teenager, and I moved out early, I was in bars by 14. Now I never, I would have a drink or two, but I never developed, um, any kind of a love for alcohol past that, simply because my stomach couldn't usually take it, and I used to have a phobia of vomiting. So like that would have just fixed it right there. It was like anytime, that I would get sick from alcohol, I would just be like, I don't know how people do this. And it wouldn't take much for me to get sick. Cause again, like I said, delicate belly. Um, so I never went too far into the drinking, but I definitely had all kinds of times in my life off and on where it was like, yeah, I'm going out to see my partner play. He's in a band and I'm intending to get tipsy. Like it was like, for me, it was conscious. It was never, oops. Well, there was maybe one time where I oopsed, and that was just because somebody was putting a fresh drink down in front of me that I thought was the first one. But other than that, I was always like intentional about my level of tipsiness, and of course I learned things like most people do, like don't mix with this with that. That makes puking. Um, but I think that just knowing how socially, I'm going to do air quotes here, acceptable it is, and how it's essentially pushed on you. It's everywhere. It's in the
Yeah.
media. It's like, and I'm sure you've experienced this. I've experienced this as somebody who's not an alcoholic, but doesn't drink. I quit drinking several years ago because my liver was dealing with some other toxicity, not to do with alcohol. Like we had some mold and some stuff going on. And so my poor liver in TCM was just so challenged that I just pulled out the minor amount of alcohol I was consuming, because I was like, and same with anything else. I was like, I'm going as toxin free as I can so that my poor liver can like work through this mold business that I've been dealing with. And so that's why I quit drinking. And I remember saying to my TCM doctor, do you think I'll ever be able to have like an organic glass of Pinot Grigio again? And she said, I don't know. And for me, the answer then was, well, then no. Like if there's a
Mm.
question as to like, will my liver be able to deal with that? Then the answer is no. But I had already been many times in my life where I had gone years without a drop of booze because I was competitively bodybuilding, and it was like, you just can't deal with the calories. And so like I'd
Yeah.
never had, these big episodes of drinking. I've definitely been too drunk before. I've definitely vomited due to mixing of alcohol or too much alcohol or not enough food or all the things. Um, and I just know, even from on my level, how socially normalized it was. If you're going out to a gig or a concert, it's like, it's so easy to have one too many because, oh, somebody's just bought you another drink, even though you were like, no, we're good. Um, and so I can't imagine, you know, with how easy it is as somebody who's not an alcoholic to overdrink, how hard it must be, in my opinion, of all of the addictions with it, to clean up from alcohol, simply because I'm sure you've experienced this many times. You're at a social event and someone offers you a new drink and you're like, no, thanks, I'm good. And they're like, why? Why don't you want to drink? Are you sure you don't want to
No,
drink? Come on, just have a drink. Like, it's so,
no, Nick, but in my days before I entered sobriety, I don't think I ever turned down a drink. I don't think
yeah, totally. Yeah. But I
right.
mean, when you're
So the thing
sober,
is,
people still will
yeah,
like, I
yeah.
mean, people offer me drinks all the time and I'm like, no, thanks, I'm good. And it always seems like, for some reason, if someone were to offer me a shot of heroin and I said, no, I'm good, nobody would be surprised by that.
Exactly. But a
Right. But
drink, they're
if,
like, why?
but
Why
if
don't
they're
you
like, do
drink?
you want a glass of wine? And I'm like, no, I'm good. People are like, what? You know?
It's becoming more and more socially acceptable not to drink, thank goodness. But I have experienced that in certain circles. And honestly, nowadays I don't even go out, or I don't even put myself in situations where there is alcohol anymore, because I'm just not interested. But I have situations like that have come up. Most of my inner circle know exactly, my situation. But I have had people say, "Oh, you don't drink. Have you ever drunk? Why did you stop? And why don't you drink?" And I'm like, oh, do I have to go? It's actually no one's business. Um,
Exactly.
and realistically, I have that allergy. So, when I ingest a drink, I just start craving more and more, and I can't stop. So in social situations back before recovery, I stopped drinking socially because I didn't drink like anyone else. I drank,
Mm,
and there was, people would sort of go, "Hmm, she's drinking a lot." I could drink any grown man under the table, and I'm only like 59 kg, right? So my drinking changed, and as it got worse on that progressive scale, I started isolating more and more and more and drinking alone. I used to call myself a drawbridge drinker. I would get home, close the door, pull up the drawbridge, so to speak, and just do
mm-hmm.
my thing alone because nobody else drank like me. And then as it progressed, nobody else thought like me, nobody else behaved like me, and now I know that this disease wants to get me on my own. So the one of the first things that I got when I went into Alcoholics Anonymous was community,
Yeah.
fellowship, and so I got power because I was powerless over this substance, and I gained power from the group and power from connection, and that's extremely important. I already had a sangha, of course, in my yoga community, but I don't know any other teachers who have or had an alcohol problem or in recovery. So I was really, and being a yoga teacher, as you know, you're a pillar in the community, and people look up to you, and people pigeonhole you. I remember being in a
Mm-hmm.
cafe once with a friend, and some of my yogis saw us there, and they go, "Oh, you drink alcohol. Oh, you're eating chicken. You eat meat." Like they already had this idea of
Mm-hmm.
what I was already like, and they'd ask me questions like, "Do you meditate every day? And do you and this that?" And so I'm like, I'm just normal, man. I've got a mouth of a sailor too, and yeah, I drink alcohol, and yeah, I'm just one of you. But back to the, you're we become um community role models, whether we want
Yes.
to or not. And
And I think
nowadays,
it's
Go on.
I was just going to say on that note, it's tricky for us to, and I think the teachers before us didn't necessarily do it so well, which is why we had so many teachers, air quotes, falling from grace, because
Oh yeah.
I think I call it pedestalizing, like when a student puts you on a pedestal, that's 50% their responsibility and also 50% yours to promptly step down and be like, no, like real flawed human being over here. Like, yes, I have this practice that is a huge gift to me. And yes, I've been doing it and can't imagine what life would have been like without it. And I'm a human being who has traumas and flaws and bad habits and weak moments and, all of the things too. Yeah.
Yeah, and nowadays, I'm like I said, I don't go out there and advertise it. You'll never see on social media anything about my recovery. Not much anyway, not that it is sort of glaring out there. But I don't hide it either because I know it can help people. And lots of my students know, and they come to me and they say, "Oh, my brother's got a problem, or my husband," and I've had a lot of that, and I've been able to help them through that, or offer them avenues to get help for their loved ones, resources. Yeah, which is pretty cool. I think that being in recovery has helped me become a better teacher, much more empathetic, compassionate, in touch with my own. Well, I mean, to be successful in recovery, really, we have to find that ego deflation and humility.
Yeah.
And that crosses over to being able to be of better service to my yogis and to women I sponsor and people I help in the alcoholic rehab.
How would you say that your yin practice, maybe more specifically than kind of general yoga? And first of all, I just want to say for y'all, Daphne and I are yin yoga lovers, and this is a yin podcast. So of course we're preaching the yin Bible here, but I'm not saying that somebody couldn't recover using other forms of yoga. But what I'm the most interested in is how, of course, your yin helped you with your recovery. Anything you want to share about that?
Absolutely. So the early days in recovery are hard. So there's more to stopping drinking than stopping drinking. It's a thinking disease, not a drinking disease, really. So what it feels like, and I always, trying to explain addiction to a normie, air quotes, is like trying to explain the color purple to a blind person. You can explain it compassionately and articulately and from an educated background, but they're still never going to exactly know what purple is. So what it feels like, well, I described the pit, yes, but it feels like you're on this giant pendulum hanging on for dear life, and it's swinging way up high, and you're going, hi, woohoo! And then it kind of stops, and it starts going back down again, and it swings violently the other way. And so, and you can't get off because you're holding on to this thing that's swinging violently, and it's just. And then once you get into recovery, the pendulum, your life's ups and downs kind of go like that, but it's definitely a lot quieter. So when I went to a yin class or when I practiced yin yoga on my own for an hour, I felt like for once I could jump off that giant swinging pendulum and find some peace, some solace, some comfort, some grounding, and then, active alcoholism, you just get right back on that pendulum and stuff. So it takes a long time for that life swinging pendulum to slow down. And I really turn to my yin practice for that. As you know, yin yoga is a gateway drug to meditation. It's that stillness. And that's what a lot of people are very uncomfortable with. But that's what I craved because my life in active addiction is crazy. Your head is crazy. Your life is crazy. There's drama all the time. You're full of fear. You're trying to keep this big secret and you're trying to function, and life is getting harder and harder and harder. So for myself, yin yoga was the only thing that probably kept me from wanting to really die in that pit when I reached a rock bottom or when I was approaching that rock bottom.
I liked what you said about how you acknowledge that that's sometimes what makes people so uncomfortable is
Mm,
about yin, is that still and quiet. And one thing I often will say to people is like, well, being uncomfortable is the catalyst to getting to the other side of growth. Like,
absolutely.
if you never ever get to sit with your discomfort, then you never deal with it. And so,
Which is what we do in alcoholism.
yeah. And
We
so,
just numb it the whole time. I don't want to
yeah.
feel this. I don't want to feel this. Yeah.
So I would imagine, I mean, I noticed this with anxiety, both with myself and with students, that being able to sit with those feelings and thoughts and emotions rising and witness them, because you've already practiced that in yin. So you've been sitting for minutes at a time, witnessing the sensation in your hamstring and learning to be okay with it, and knowing that, this too shall pass. And then I will have a better moment where I'm not noticing the sensation in my hamstring. Um, for me, really sets the stage for then being able to do that with your mental, emotional realm. Like if I can sit and be with my body for minutes at a time and be observant and drop inward instead of being sort of distracted, then I can also be more likely to then do that with my emotional state, with my thoughts. That witnessing consciousness that gets cultivated in this practice, I think, is just so brilliant and something that people don't talk about a lot, actually.
Mm. Alcoholism is uh it's an illness of mind, body, and spirit. So obviously we have a mental illness. We're physically very sick by the time we reach out for help. And we're also spiritually ill. And I didn't know that spiritual illness was even a thing until I started doing the 12-step program and connecting with the sober community. And alcoholism wants to isolate me from my community, from my higher power, and really from my truth of who I am. And
Mm-hmm.
I rediscovered that through the 12-step program, through sobriety, through working the program of self-discovery. And yin was really I don't want to say pivotal, catalyst, what's the word I'm looking for? It was the most integral part of my
Essential.
recovery. Essential,
Essential.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Um, I'm curious because I mean, and definitely don't share more than you want to, but um, you talked about you talked about the bottom, and this is one thing that I have witnessed with all of the people that in my life that have been addicts, is that definitely sobriety or getting clean does not tend to happen or stick, even if you put someone in rehab, until they've hit that bottom themselves and been like, okay, this can't continue. Um, and you were going through this while you were like living your life and teaching your yoga and like doing your things. And so how did life shift sort of in the more immediate moment of like, did you like have the aha and then immediately find out about a meeting, or like what was that transition for you?
Well, like I said, I'm a pedigree alcoholic. So I've got a sibling who's also in recovery. And I went years and years ago, went to some meetings with her. So I knew about Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew there's a community out there that could help. The catalyst was really, I mean, who knows what the decider is? Everyone's different. I just reached a point where I realized I couldn't stop on my own. I was powerless over this thing, completely powerless. My life was getting to the point where it's completely unmanageable, and I couldn't do it on my own. So I had planned to go to meetings, and then I wouldn't, and then that went on for about a month or two, and then finally went to a meeting, and what I heard, what I was given at my very first meeting was hope. I heard people sharing that thought like me, that had done things like me, that were so similar. I mean, they were different people, different walks of life, but we had that similarity. And sharing that similarity, it was the first time in my life where I realized, wow, there's other people out there like me. And it was a very supportive environment, in that they didn't want anything from me except just to see me get well. And they honestly, in that kind of a fellowship environment, community environment, they just loved me back to health. And very quickly, I got a sponsor who's my person, and I now sponsor other women as well. My go-to person that, if I'm struggling with anything in life, I call her, and it's no longer now. July this year marks 6 years of continuous sobriety for me. And it's no
Congratulations.
longer, thank you. It's no longer about the alcohol. I don't crave it. I don't want it. It's not part of my life. It doesn't pop up into my brain. But it's now the thinking, and there's sort of three facets to recovery, and that's trust a higher power, clean house, and help others. And when life, the growth happens when we're uncomfortable. God makes us uncomfortable, so we move, of course. And when life's glitches and things happen, that's my person to go to remind me of the program and to keep me working my program. So I have to do something for my disease every single day. The biggest saboteur to sobriety, even if you're in long-term sobriety, 20, 30 years, the biggest saboteur is complacency. So every morning I wake up and I remind myself that I'm powerless over this thing and that I have to do something, whether it's going to a meeting, reaching out to another alcoholic, messaging my sponsor, or helping others, something to do with the community or my STEP program, or if an altercation comes up with a coworker or a family member or something, I work it through with the steps and let it go. I've got to keep my house clean because it's things like fears and resentments and anger and that's the stuff that keeps me sick and will slowly draw me back into a place of illness again.
Right. The difference between having the tools to work with this in an ongoing way for your whole life versus kind of white knuckling it and hoping you don't relapse kind of thing. Like having those tools that you can be like, okay, I know that this is what I need to do in order to stay sober.
Yeah. And we have to give it away. We have to help others. The step 12 is all about helping others. And if it wasn't for step 12, I wouldn't be here. Other people who've gone before me, helping me get sober. And it's an incurable disease, but it's definitely manageable, but you do have to work at it. And I'm going to have this the rest of my life, and that's okay. I'm living today, with the tools of recovery and with my yoga practice. I have a pretty cool life.
I'd love to transition into hearing a bit more about how you went from fledgling sober person to now I work in an alcohol rehab center, because that in itself, that's a big journey. And I can imagine like an incredibly rewarding place to work,
Incredibly rewarding.
hard, stressful, and rewarding, I'm sure. So I'd love to hear a little bit about how you went from, okay, I'm sober, I'm going to meetings, and I'm just kind of trying to clean up my life, to I want to, beyond being a sponsor, I want to step into this recovery process in a kind of a bigger way as part of my livelihood.
Yeah, I mean, it happened very organically, kind of like, starting to do teacher trainings and stuff. The early days in recovery are hard. They are hard work. And, you have to put it has to be basically your number one thing. You have to put your sobriety and the efforts you put into that ahead of everything. Anything you put above your sobriety, you're going to lose. So, if I'm not sober, I will lose my job. I will lose my son. I will lose my license. I will lose my dignity. I will lose my money. I'll probably lose my house. So that's the number one thing in my life. And for a normie from the outside looking in, that might look self-centered or selfish, but that's what I have to do. So if I'm in a situation somewhere where it's uncomfortable or threatening, or, potentially I might struggle or drink over, I got to get myself out of that. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So the journey, those early days are all about working the program, connecting with a higher power and taking it one day at a time. That's the most important thing. Just take today. I don't know. I mean, even today, right now, I'm just going to stay sober today. I can do that. So what they said to me when I first came into my very first meeting is, as you know, had they said to me, Daphne, you're never going to drink again, and I would have failed. But they said, just don't drink today. And I said, well, I can do that. I can do that. And then I woke up the next day, just don't drink today. Okay, I can do one day. But even now, if I think I'm never going to have a drink again for the rest of my life, that's like overwhelming. And I can't face that. But I can do today and get my head on that pillow sober tonight. And I'm going to face tomorrow. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So yeah, it's those early days are all about working the program, going to work, putting food on the table, and keeping things going. I never went to a rehab. I just did my meetings and got my sponsor and just stayed, just really and did my practice and just lived quietly, one day at a time. It does get easier. So alcoholism is a progressive disease, but recovery is also progressive. It gets easier and it gets better as we go along. So, a couple of years into my sobriety, I started, I was asked by another woman who was in new recovery if I'd sponsor her. And I was like, oh, sponsoring. Okay, I guess I'm at that stage. And someone once said to me, Daphne, if you have 2 days sobriety, you can help someone with 1 day sobriety. So I ran it past my sponsor and she said, yeah, go and sponsor. And that really helps our own sobriety as well. So I've sponsored many women over the years. And I have a lot of people in recovery coming to my classes, my Yin Yoga classes. It's a big tool for recovery, as we've already talked about, which brings me a lot of joy seeing the AA members and the sober community coming to my public classes. And then a good friend of mine, a little over a year ago, opened a rehab. It's been a dream of his for a long time. And he got in touch with me and said, would you be willing to teach yin yoga at the rehab? And I said, heck yeah, of course, of course. And I loved it so much. And they were short staffed, and he asked me to do some shifts because I'm in recovery. All the staff are in recovery, of course, and I loved it. And then, of course, I started doing more and more and more. And then I was offered a management position. And I said, well, wasn't really looking for a part-time job, but because I'm still teaching so many classes and stuff. But I said, no, this is a great transition. And I'm still teaching yoga there. I'm managing, I'm the operations manager of the alcohol rehab. It's a small private rehab. We have a maximum of 8 people, and I absolutely love it.
Mm. So I imagine you cut a couple of your public classes to allow for some space for this. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sort of at that stage in my career where if I don't absolutely love the classes I'm teaching, then I should be passing the baton on to someone else. So some of my
Agreed.
classes I was traveling up to 35K to get to. They were, getting home late at night. And so I said to myself, if I ever get to the point where I'm like, oh, I don't want to go and teach this class tonight, then I shouldn't be. So
Yeah.
I've been happy to pass those on. And so the classes I have, the few that I still have, the public classes, I absolutely love. They're long-term yogis that I know really well, and they're close to home. So I'm still doing that. I can work my schedule around my full-time job. And then, of course, teaching at the rehab, with teaching yoga, yin yoga at the rehab.
And I feel like as yoga professionals, it's so rare that and wise really, because let's face it, I mean, most people don't get rich teaching yoga.
No.
But it's so rare, and so that you get an opportunity to have a livelihood that you can do with your yoga that you feel also really passionate about. Because most of the yoga teachers I know that have a side job or a full-time job, whether it's full or part-time, and they're teaching, part-time, are at a job that they hate, and they don't feel like they're making an impact. And, and so, that it becomes this, this kind of really like, kind of challenge from one hand to the other. It's like, I have this yoga thing that I love doing and I'd love to do that, but I like have this other job which pays my bills. And so for you to have something that you can do that is so complementary and that you are so passionate about is what a gift, to be able to do the two things that you're so passionate about and that you love so much, instead of having to choose, like, I could do this or I could do that.
I'm
Yeah.
really, really grateful. Yeah, it is so fulfilling. I mean, yeah, I've the two most, and then when you asked me to come on this podcast and talk about my two favorite things, I'm like, yes, I guess. you
Yeah.
know,
And when I did reach out, I wasn't sure because again, like you said, you don't hide your sobriety, but you're also out there waving the big sober flag on your Instagram or anything. And so, you had reached out via DM, not even in a comment under my post. And so I really wasn't sure like where you were in your comfort level with talking about it. So thank you for doing this. And I think it might have been pre-recording that I said that, for me, and I get this question all the time from yoga teachers that I mentor, it's like, when is it time to share my journey with my students? And I always
mm,
say, when it's a scar, not a fresh wound. Because
yeah, I love that.
when it's a fresh wound, you're in it. Like you're not able to hold space for other people. And if you start sharing stuff like that with your students, now they're holding space for you, and you're not sitting in the role of the teacher. But when you've been through it for a while and you've kind of come to the other side of, and like you said, I mean, your sobriety is going to be a lifelong journey, but you've come through it to the degree that you're like, okay, I can sponsor people, and like I have my tools and I have some clarity, and I, can see what a gift this has all been. Um, I think if you, when you're at that point, and only when you're at that point, in my opinion, with anything you've gone through, then if you share it, it's nothing but a gift for people, because other people that are where you were can go, oh, that's a thing. You mean I could do that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. To be able to take such an insidious disease and situation like I was in, and to be able to turn it around and help people is really rewarding. And
Yeah.
we don't promote, we attract in sobriety. And someone has to say, "Hey, look, like that's her journey, and she overcame it. Maybe I can do that too." Because it's a
Mm-hmm.
very hopeless place to be, in that pit where there's big high walls, no ladder, no one else. That's an awful place. And
And
honestly,
your mind's
death,
telling you that you're alone and nobody would understand and all of that stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
and few people do. And to find that community who do get it and do have the tools to pass on to you to overcome it is, we can't do this on our own. We absolutely can't. The one of the most important things for me in yoga is my community, my sangha, and the most important thing in sobriety is the community. Where there's
Yeah.
power in numbers. It's kind of like that snowflake theory. One snowflake on its own is powerless, but you put millions of snowflakes together, and they're really powerful. They can shut down roads, shut down a whole city. They got a lot of power. So, and I know if I am feeling, the complacency, like I said, is the number one saboteur for sobriety. And if times I feel like I got this, I don't need to go to a meeting this week, then that's when I really need to go. I'm starting how would I, yeah, I just know that the further I stay away from community, I know my disease is actually creeping in. My
Mm-hmm.
disease will always be there. I kind of describe it to people like, I'm in my house and I've got all the windows shut and the doors locked, and my disease is always wandering around the perimeter of the house, just trying the door, just seeing if
Mm-hmm.
there's a window unlocked. It's always trying to get in somehow, and I'm just got to be very vigilant about it every single day, one day at a time.
Yeah. I've mentioned to you that I've been in several open meetings, and um as an anxious personality type, I used to hear this one day at a time thing and think, how is that even possible? Like, I'm constantly future tripping. Like, how is that even possible? And it's, I would say, probably only been since moving here and having my bottom with anxiety, is when that finally started to hit home, that it was like, oh right, okay, how am I today? today I'm
Yeah.
feeling anxious, or today I'm feeling grounded, but knowing that like tomorrow might be different. And yeah, that one day at a time thing it's been such an interesting thing, because we talk about it all the time in yoga too, right? Like come back to the
Yeah.
present moment. But
Yeah.
it's not an easy thing to do. It's not easy to just be like, okay, I'm not going to think about tomorrow. I'm just going to be like, today in this moment, this is what's happening. And that's what I'm going to be present to. And we'll worry about tomorrow. And it makes it actually, to be honest, kind of hard to function in society also with that, because, we do have to do some planning. We have to like, plan our work and our vacations. And like, so it's finding that balance of like, okay, just today, just this moment. And here's what I hope for the future.
Yeah, future tripping can be like going down rabbit holes. I mean,
Totally.
90% of what you future trip on is not going to happen. Yeah,
Yep.
we do have to plan ahead too, but we also have to remain flexible and open to changes. You know what it's like when you're traveling or planning a vacation, that flight is canceled or the road is closed or somebody will break a leg and can't go away, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So um, and not being necessarily um, tied to that outcome and letting it flow, but of course just always bring it back to the day, because future tripping for an alcoholic will lead us to drink. I mean, I can
Yeah.
have future conversations in our minds that will never happen, or we tend to be catastrophizers as well,
Mm-hmm.
and that can
Mm-hmm.
be toxic. So
90%
key.
of what we future trip about actually never comes about, if not
Correct.
more, it's
It's
like,
not more.
and one thing I finally realized was that, at least with anxiety, one of the reasons that we future trip is because we think that makes us safer, because we've now figured out
Mm.
this could happen. I have a solution. This could happen. Here's the solution. This could happen. Here's the solution. Um, and I would say, oddly enough, going through what we've all gone through with the pandemic was a bit of a catalyst for me, in that it just proved to me that there are things that will come up that you've never future tripped about, and that
Yeah.
you will have to adapt and figure out, and that like you truly can't be prepared for everything that happens, other than to stay grounded and calm and to take care of yourself. Because if you can't take care of yourself, then when that stuff comes at you, you've got nothing, no
Nothing.
resources. Yeah. I loved what you
And
said
that's the same.
earlier about with your recovery, about you mentioned that some people would say that putting your recovery first every day would be selfish and self-centered. I'd like to think that actually those two things do not mean the same thing. I
Yeah.
think that you can be self-centered and not be selfish. So self-centered to me is, I'm taking care of this self because I know, and I have the wisdom to know that if I don't, there is nothing for others. Right? If
That's
I
often the
don't,
number one. Sorry.
yeah, if I don't focus on my own mental, emotional, or physical health, then, there is nothing. And to think otherwise is delusional, frankly, in my opinion. To think that you can constantly put everyone else before you without ever filling your own cup, without ever taking care of your own mental, emotional state, to me, that's just delusional.
Yeah, that's probably the number one advice I tell sponsees is, don't put anything above your sobriety. Your sobriety is the number one thing,
Yeah.
and then everything else will fall into place. Without that, we have nothing. But I think as women, we have been. I mean, okay, I'm speaking from a place of a Gen X woman, and we're taught to put everyone else in front of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that, everything has to change in recovery for me. If nothing changes, nothing changes. My lifestyle had to change, my thinking, my behavior, everything, absolutely. And always thinking of my sobriety number one. And
Yeah.
also when an alcoholic heals, a family heals and a community heals. And the greatest gift, my son is now 16, so he really only remembers me so much now in recovery. But the greatest gift we can ever give our children is sobriety.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually
Recovery.
often why I say that well, that is why I teach yoga. Like the whole reason that I decided to become a yoga teacher was because I know what it's like to be on your last nerve, in chronic pain, struggling, suffering. And there is no way that a
Mhm.
person who's existing in that state, like a scared, frightened, alone animal, essentially, is going to be able to be patient,
Mhm.
loving, kind, and compassionate. It's just not possible. You cannot give to others what you don't have. And so my whole reason for teaching yoga was, if I can help students find that inner resource in the yoga class, and it's so happy when it does, and if these teachings then start to infiltrate their lives when they're not in yoga class, and they start remembering these
Mm.
lessons that they've learned on the mat when they're in the kitchen dealing with a screaming child,
Yeah.
then that's how I make the world better, is one student at a time. And then, of course, when you train teachers, you get to ripple effect that even more. Because there was a point where, when teachers were coming to me and saying, um, can you teach me? And I was kind of like, I don't think I've been teaching yoga. I mean, even though it had been well over a decade, I was like, I don't know if I've been teaching yoga long enough to teach teachers. But what I realized is that I can only teach so many students. But if I can help other teachers,
Yeah.
really stand in their own ground and become the true teachers that they're meant to be, then they can teach more people. And then the ripple effect just gets like even more exaggerated, or like you said, the passing of the baton, because it's like I can only do this part, but
Mhm.
there's all these people over here still. So if I can pass that baton to you, and now you can teach in your community, and in your community you can create people who are, more compassionate and loving and kind, and know how to take care of
Mhm.
themselves so that they can be present. That to me is how the world changes.
I get so much joy out of seeing my trainees go out and create their own classes and their own community. And, they come to my class and we catch up, or I see on social media that what they're
What they're
they're
doing.
doing. And
Yes, it's so great.
it's so rewarding. And
I
it's
know.
just
Every time
exactly
I
what you
see on social
said.
media one of my former students advertising their yin class, I'm like, yes,
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 me
yeah,
too. I
totally.
know. And
Yeah,
I put a little comment on there, go like, so and so is the best, or
yeah, yeah. Big fist pumps
yeah.
and
But I mean,
hearts. Yeah,
and we create our own community. Like I've got my own community that I created from zero. There was no yin yoga where I lived,
yeah.
and now they're creating their own, and it's just it's beautiful. And I've always considered myself as a yoga teacher part of the chain, in the lineage. I'm just another, I'm this generation and I'm passing it on, and that's, our work is so fulfilling. Like you just said, I'm so grateful that I have a job that I wake up, I get excited to go and do both my
Mm-hmm.
jobs, teaching yoga and working at the rehab, working with alcoholics and watching them get well really quickly, and watching them, the light bulb go on and their lives improve, and the lives of their kids and their families, and it's hugely rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And what a gift to have places like that rehab center where people can go. Because one of the things that I always used to say was so transformative too about studying with Paul Grilley at LMB is that when you went there, the whole rest of your life was not there, right? You didn't have
Yeah.
to buy groceries, you didn't have to cook, you didn't have to clean, you didn't have to do your
Exactly.
laundry, you didn't have to take care of the kids if you had kids. And so you were able to 100% focus on what you were doing. And I would imagine the same thing in a rehab center, where it's like
Yeah.
you go and your job is just, let's get you clean and sober. Like
Yeah.
this is what you're doing while you're here. I'm sure that there's other things that they have to do while they're there as well, but that ability to really focus in, um must be such a gift. I'm thinking about folks like you and friends that I have that are alcoholics, that had to get sober, um and go to meetings while they were still lifing, like while all of the
Mhm.
drama of life was still happening, and how much harder that must be. Although I would imagine there's that opposite effect too, like when we leave a training at LNB and you then go back to even just the airport, it's like, oh God,
Oh, I remember, yeah.
here's real life again. Holy crap, I haven't been dealing with like noise and people and all the things. And so I would imagine it's similar when people leave rehab, that it, now they go back into their life. But luckily there are meetings and sponsors and therapists
Yeah,
and
so
ongoing
Len
support.
coming in with us, so it's typically a 30-day program, and we're like a big safety net, and we catch them and we nurture them. Initially it's all about, just getting well physically the first week, and then you start working on, the spiritual and the mental side of it. And then towards the end of their stay, we are prepared, well, actually the whole time they're with us, we're preparing them to get back out into society. But I
Mm-hmm.
mean, just like you said, when we go away and train with Paul, how good is it just not to have to worry about driving the kids to school and homework and laundry and the bills, and we can really jump out of our lives. And that's a gift. And that's not easy for a lot of people to do. Like we touched on, a lot of people can't make trainings like that, because how do you stop your life for 3 weeks or a month or even a week? Like it's really hard. But at the end of the day, this is a fatal disease. It's a
Mm-hmm.
serious disease. It's an incurable disease. But there are a lot of tools out there, but we can't do it on our own. We need community. And the yoga was my yin yoga practice. I'm not even sure if I would have been able to get sober without the yin. And, I also tell my classes that as well. I really keep it in the moment. I tell them to follow the breath. I tell them to, even just listening to the sounds around them, I just want to keep
Mm-hmm.
them present, because when you're in that stillness, it can be like, and the head's going, the
Mm-hmm.
monkey
Mm-hmm.
mind.
Mm-hmm.
That's what a lot of people struggle with, who first come to yin, or when they first get sober, they no longer have that comfort of the numbing of the alcohol, and their head's just going, and I can coach them through that with the yin yoga.
Yeah, it is the opportunity to learn and begin to practice that skill of witnessing, and knowing that this too shall pass. This thought, this
Yeah.
this sensation, this will pass. That we can just like, ooh, stay with it, witness it, and and be present to it. Yeah, such a gift. Yeah. And I think the reason that for me that I think yin is uniquely suited for that is because we're not moving quickly. So I don't mind a good flow practice. I kind of prefer half a flow to vinyasa or ashtanga, like a little slower. But
Mm,
I like to move my body or to do qigong. I find those practices invigorating and energizing. But
mm,
I'm not going to be diving deep into my inner landscape and witnessing my thoughts and my feelings while I'm practicing,
correct.
because I got to think
Correct.
about like, oh, right foot here, left arm there, but like there's so much proprioception, and awareness of where's my body in space and what is my body doing, that it doesn't allow you to do interoception as well as yin, where there's relatively little adjustments. I mean, you come out of your rebound, you find your working position, you grab any props you need, and then you just settle in for time. And so it's so much easier in a yin practice to really observe what is happening in your head, in your heart, and in your body when you have that time to just be there.
And yin yoga is a full mind, body, and spirit experience. And like I said, in recovery, we are sick, mind, body, and spirit. And um, but Paul Grilley also says that yin yoga is not a complete form of exercise. It's
Yeah.
yin yoga. It's not yang and yin. It's not, we need to find the Tao, the balance. And yeah, you need to go out and do the gym stuff when you need to walk or do the qigong or do the vinyasa or whatever it is. But yin is definitely an integral tool for all of us. I mean, I always say things like, if everyone did yin yoga, we probably wouldn't need so many hospitals. The jails wouldn't be so busy.
Agreed.
It's such a full, it's such a full experience. It cures so many things, which if you're doing, any kind of other exercise, it doesn't get that introspection. We also need to dive in recovery. I mean, that's all I can really speak from. And we need to look inwards. We need to
Mm-hmm.
find what's tripping us up in our lives? What are we scared of? Fear literally guides our every action, reaction, and inaction. And that's mostly subconscious. Like, what you think, why do I keep reacting like that all my life? Because usually there's a fear subconscious in there somewhere driving that. So we
It's
need to look inwards. We need
it's
to
that
discover,
unearthing the subconscious into the conscious to be able to be like, oh,
to
I see what
deal
I'm
with it.
doing here. Yes. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember Paul Grilley gave. Do you remember the iceberg analogy? So if you
Probably.
have, imagine an ice, yeah, imagine when you have an iceberg and you've got the surface of the water here, and all we see is just the tip of the iceberg, and below the surface is this huge mass
Yeah.
of the same iceberg. And the surface of the water is our consciousness. So all we're really aware of on a day-to-day basis is what we see up here, the tip of the iceberg. But all of this below the surface of the water is our subconscious, which is guiding our every action, reaction, inaction, and it's everything we've ever done, said, seen, experienced in our lives is all there, and that's still very much a part of our it interchanges with our consciousness all the time. We need to dive deep into that with a meditation practice or a yin practice or a deep 12-step therapy practice or something like that to truly understand
Mm-hmm.
ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, for a lot of people who that's foreign to or don't understand that kind of a process, yin yoga is a gateway to that.
Yeah. And it's funny that you said that yin's a gateway to meditation, because I always say the same. It's like people don't think they can meditate, but then they just spent 5 minutes doing it in that pose, and I think
Yeah.
that's because people have such a gross misunderstanding of like what meditation is. So
The
that's
cross-legged,
part of it.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
Or they think you're going to sit down and do some ancient mudra and suddenly their mind will be clear and they will stop thinking. And it's like, no, that's not really what we're working with here.
No,
Um,
people say to me, I can't meditate because I can't clear my mind. I said, well, I can't do that either, but that's not what meditation is.
yeah. Yeah.
So
It's like this, the
those kind of
biggest
conversations.
misconception is that you're supposed to sit in some, fancy position and suddenly your mind will be clear and you will achieve bliss. And it's like, no, actually what most of us are dealing with is, oh, there's a thought again. Oh, there we go again, Yeah. And then coming back to
I
that
kind of
anchor.
just I kind of describe it as the puffy clouds on a summer day. So I'll coach
Yes.
them in my classes as well. I'll say, imagine, so I said, just imagine you're looking at puffy clouds. The thoughts are like clouds. You look at the clouds on a summer day, they let them pass, let them go, welcome in the next ones, have a look, let
I
them
use the
go,
exact
just
same
see what
analogy.
thoughts.
Yeah.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Except I call it
I
big
wonder if
sky
it's a Paul
awareness.
Grilley. Big sky.
Yeah.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that.
Because I find that there is a point, not always for every student and not in every class, where they don't need to use a more concentrated technique anymore to bring their mind back, because they have created that kind of what I call big sky awareness, where I've always say, you're laying in the summer field, you see the clouds, you're aware of the clouds as they move by, but you're not making animal shapes and telling stories about each cloud. You're just like, the cloud is there and it's gone. And oh, there's another cloud and it's now floating by. Yeah.
And I tell them they're not to react or process what thoughts come up. In fact,
Yeah.
I have an acronym SOAR, SOAR, and I'll often start my yin yoga classes with that. So I'll say S is for surrender, just surrender to the breath, just follow the inhale and the exhale, and that starts to get them grounded. And then I'll say observe the physical body. It might be anything like the pressure with your body against the floor, or the clothes around you, or a breeze on the skin. And then I'll say, allow thoughts and feelings to come and go, or emotions, without judgment or process. And then I'll say the R is for release. Just let go of all effort, surrender to gravity, arriving on your mat in the present moment.
What a beautiful
And that
acronym. I love it. I love
SOAR,
it.
SOAR. Yeah. I've got that on my social media actually, but I
Yeah.
start most of my classes like that with SOAR.
I start mine with guided mindfulness while they're in constructive rest. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I really, if there's new teachers listening, I think it takes time, but crafting a unique, what I call bookends for your classes, like your signature thing that you open class with, and then of course what you do at the end. Any teacher I know that's been teaching for a long time will say that, you know, it took them some time, and they, you know, over the years of
Yeah.
teaching, that they came up with this bookend at the beginning of what they do, and why they do it, and how conscious and methodical that is, and then of course how they finish as well. And um I would encourage any teacher who doesn't have that, like if you're just putting people in child's pose for 3 breaths and then starting practice, to really create something, cultivate something that, you know, sets the stage. And I'm actually much more focused on that than like theming my classes. Like I would
Mm.
much rather have that solid nervous system. Here's how we're dealing with the mind, sort of bookend. And then at the end for me is always gratitude, and acknowledging that our practice doesn't just affect us. So having those
Yeah.
bookends to me far more important than some sort of fancy theme that might fit with current events or the day of the week or whatever. Yeah.
I'll always end with gratitude. That's a really
Yeah.
big part of recovery too, is focusing on what we have instead of, because if you're not focused, if you know, if you're focusing on what you don't have, then it, you know, all sorts of desires come into it and stuff. But yeah, always focusing every day on the gratitude of even small things, like there's some weeds outside my door, but they're producing flowers and they're beautiful. You know, it can be
Yeah.
anything. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, and the biggest piece of advice I give to new teachers as well is just be yourself. You know,
Don't be
I
me,
tell
be you.
jokes. Yeah,
Yeah.
everyone else is taken. Just be you. I tell terrible jokes in my
Me too.
classes. I have this hideous cackle, and they all love it. And you know, and I'm really silly. And you know, if you want someone who's going to be really super serious and has a really quiet voice, because I get this like really loud cackle and loud voice in my class. If you want someone who's soft, there's other classes out there. But I'm just going to be me. You know. That's all you can be. So I remember I went to someone else's class, lovely teacher, lots of training. And as soon as she stepped up to teach, she said, okay, and now coming to Trikonasana. And I'm like, what the?
Who are you? Yeah. Yeah. Where it's
Yeah,
like they suddenly are so disconnected from who they are as a person once they step on the mat. It's a big mistake. Yeah. The
yeah, just
yoga
be
teacher
yourself.
voice comes in, and
Oh,
all of
yeah,
their
yeah.
like really woo woo analogies. And it's like, oh, just speak about your own life, your own path, your own ahas, your own. Yeah. I think maybe we'll start to wrap it up a little bit. Um, and I like to do this with some kind of rapid fire questions. Some are fun, some are
Cool.
soulful. And
Okay.
then, yeah, and then you'll have an opportunity. We'll talk a little bit about where people can find you and work with you and all that stuff. So the first one is coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Awesome. Uh, your favorite ice
Strong
cream?
coffee. Oh, coffee.
Coffee
Coffee
ice
ice
cream
cream.
too.
Yeah.
Awesome. um, one thing people often get wrong about me.
Oh, um, that's a good question. I think there's a lot of things people don't know about me. Like, I have my motorcycle license and I used to own a Harley, used to drive a Harley. So I think that they get wrong that I'm this like typical, and I'm an alcoholic, you know? I mean, they think I'm this demure, vegetarian, soft-spoken yoga teacher, but actually I ride motorcycles and I've got a hideous laugh, and I'm a recovered alcoholic. So there you go.
Awesome. Do you have a pop culture vice, like a show you binge or a movie series or something that you're obsessed with,
Oh,
or a book series for that matter?
my favorite book ever is Mists of Avalon, Marion Zimmer
Oh,
Bradley.
yes. It's a good book. Um, I think I might know part of the answer to this question, but we'll do it anyways. When I'm not practicing yoga, I am,
Working, working, and working,
yeah,
or
you're
going
like
to AA meetings,
working on my
walking,
sobriety and working. Yes, exactly.
helping others, walking my dog, spending time with my 16-year-old son, and doing DIY, a little bit of gardening, but who really has time for much more than working, really?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Um, one weird fact about you, other than the Harley, um, laugh thing. There's got to be something where you're just like, people are always really think this is weird.
Where do you start? Weird thing. I don't know. I sleep with my pug under the covers. I don't know. Where do you
Okay, that
I
works.
don't know.
Mine was I eat a ridiculous amount of pickles.
Oh, I know one.
Okay.
I have a V8 car. Again, I'm not the pigeonhole.
Nice. What the world needs now is
Compassion, empathy, community,
nice.
and presence.
Beautiful. One thing I wish people knew about Yin Yoga.
Oh,
I know.
Just think of one.
I know. It's hard to pick one.
How life-changing it is, and how it's not just yoga, it's a full mind, body, spirit experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it's for everyone. I have a class I teach every Sunday, and I've got sometimes kids as young as sort of 9, 8 can come. I've got one person over 90 who comes. I've got people who come who can, with a walking a Zimmer frame walking frame, they can barely lower themselves down on the ground. I've got athletes that come. I've got mothers, people with fused spine, hip replacements, and new knees, all that, and they can all practice together in the same class. How amazing is that?
It's amazing. Yes.
And it's so inclusive, and people say to me, oh, I'm not flexible, I can't do yoga for this reason or that. Everyone can do yin yoga.
Yeah. Is there anything else that I forgot to ask you about that you would like to add?
I can't really think of anything. I do live in New Zealand, and I work at Keystone Lodge, and if anyone listening is potentially having problems with alcohol or knows someone, reach out to me, DM me. My socials are Yin Yoga NZ on Instagram and Facebook. I'd love to hear from you. I'm always, my phone is always on for those suffering, and I light a candle often for those still suffering alcoholics. And my classes are in North Auckland if you want to ever come and see me in person, but send me a message anytime.
Yeah, you mentioned that you don't have a website, but you do still offer a yin training. You said once a year, is that right?
Yes, so that is in North Auckland, New Zealand, and I hold it every March. So again, I usually start advertising about 6 months ahead of time on my social media, or again, you can personal message me through Yin Yoga NZ, and come on the waiting list or go on the mailing list. And
yeah, so they can just find you on Instagram and reach out and give you their email and say, let me know when the training is live.
And people often ask if it's online. I don't do online trainings, in person. Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know. And I would imagine that people travel in for it as well. Like even if they don't live right where the training is, that people can, if they live in New Zealand, they can commute in and get an Airbnb or something and do it that way.
Yeah, people do that often because I'm the only one offering a Paul Grilley type training in New Zealand. So they come from all over.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, friend, you and I will say our proper goodbyes once I hit stop record. But I just want to thank you so much for sharing your experience and your expertise and being willing to talk about, something that's a little bit difficult and a little bit messy.
Yeah, it's not easy, but there is a solution. Reach out. Don't feel like you have to do it alone. And again, thank you so much for inviting me today. It is really lovely to connect with you again, Nick.
Awesome. Okay, friends listening to the pod or watching on YouTube, until next time, bye for now.